After my family went bankrupt, Truman's first love returned. She smiled and asked Truman, "Now that you've had your revenge, when are you planning to divorce Emily?" Only then did I realize that my marriage to Truman was part of his plan all along. And now, I'm pregnant with his child. The fetus is already 2 months old, but the test results show some instability. Avoid intercourse for now, get plenty of rest, and improve your nutrition. Come back for a follow-up in a week, the doctor advised. If we have intercourse, will I definitely lose the baby? I asked calmly. The doctor looked up at me and replied, "There's a very high chance. You young people, for the sake of the baby, just hold off for now." I left the hospital in a daze, holding the ultrasound image. The world outside was bustling with people coming and going, yet I had no idea where to go. I used to eagerly look forward to this baby's arrival. Truman and I had been married for 3 years, but I hadn't conceived. Both of us had been checked, and everything seemed normal. I even tried folk remedies to increase our chances. He told me it wasn't the right time, assuring me not to worry. Back then, I thought he was just comforting me. But yesterday, I learned the truth: he never intended to have a child with me. And 2 months ago, on the very day my family went bankrupt, even though I was emotionally drained, I still gave in to him. That night, he must have been too excited about destroying my family's company and forgot to switch out my contraceptive pills. That evening, I placed the baby's ultrasound photo inside a small bottle and buried it in the garden of our villa. A tiny mound of dirt surrounded by blooming roses. Looking at this garden, once filled with happy memories, I couldn't help but marvel at how long Truman had held back. To get his revenge, he married the adopted daughter of his enemy, acting humble and submissive on the surface, while secretly tearing my family apart piece by piece. Feeling reluctant to leave? Truman asked, suddenly appearing behind me, wrapping his arms around me. "Don't worry, I'll make enough money to buy this place back." The villa had already been auctioned off, and we had to move out tomorrow. The person who bought it was none other than Truman himself. He really was committed to playing his role to the end. A few days ago, I passed by his new company and saw him sitting in a cafe with Joanna. But Truman had told me before that he wasn't in touch with her anymore. For some reason, I found myself sneaking inside. They were so engrossed in their conversation that they didn't even notice me sitting just behind them. The 3 of us had been in the same class in high school. I had known Joanna since our first year, and Truman transferred in during the second year. He was dazzling, instantly capturing everyone's attention. Together with Joanna, they were the school's golden couple. I, on the other hand, was the adopted daughter of a wealthy family, constantly mocked and scorned from the very first day, despite working hard and being the top student in every exam. I held on to the belief that things would get better after the struggle, surviving day by day. Then one cold winter day, he handed me a cup of hot milk tea, his eyes sparkling like stars. "Looks like we're desk mates from now on. Please take care of me." That cup of milk tea was the sweetest I've ever tasted. It was the start of my first crush, and also the beginning of his revenge. Emily's adoptive parents' company is done for. "Congratulations on getting your revenge," Joanna said, raising her coffee cup. Truman took a sip but said nothing. "Any news on Wade?" Truman shook his head. "Maybe he's already fled abroad. He's useless, not half as smart as Emily. Don't worry too much, he's not a threat." I stood there, listening without moving. I didn't even know why I felt so calm. I should have stormed out, pouring hot coffee all over their smug faces. "So, when are you going to divorce Emily?" Joanna asked with a smile. I wanted to know that too. Perhaps he was waiting for my brother Wade to show up so he could take him down as well. After all, Truman had once said, "If you want to uproot the weeds, you must dig out the roots." Truman put down his coffee cup. "Not yet. She's still useful." "Has she figured out who you really are?" "No," Truman answered, his voice filled with certainty. He had every reason to be confident. He hid his true self so well. If I hadn't seen them today, I might never have realized that the man sleeping next to me was a wolf in disguise. The night breeze swayed the roses around us. "So, how was work today?" I asked gently, just as I always did. He nuzzled his chin against my neck. Same as usual. Did you go to the hospital? I instinctively touched my abdomen. Yeah, just some gastritis. After taking the medicine, I feel much better. I wasn't giving up on this baby. At least not until Wade was safe. That's good. Let's go inside and see if there's anything else we need to pack. We're moving to the new house tomorrow. He pulled me back toward the villa. I took one last look at that small mound of dirt. My dreams of happiness were forever buried beneath those roses. Our new home was a 2-bedroom apartment in an old complex near Truman's company. It was just a 10-minute walk to his office. Truman unpacked the boxes, while Joanna brought over some former employees from my family's company to help us. I stood on the balcony, staring into the distance, doing nothing. Look at her, the spoiled princess, not even lifting a finger in her own house. We're not her servants, one of the girls muttered. She's no princess. She's just an adopted daughter, didn't you know? Another replied. No way, tell me more. Well, the chairman and his wife couldn't have kids for years. Someone told them adopting a child would bring good luck, so they went to an orphanage and adopted her. And sure enough, the next year, they had Wade. That's incredible. Yeah, but after Wade was born, they stopped paying much attention to her. They even married her off to a regular guy. If they'd arranged a proper marriage for her, maybe the company wouldn't have gone under. Maybe it's karma for not treating the child that brought them luck properly. At that point, Joanna noticed me and quickly pulled the 2 girls away. After a while, she came over to apologize. Don't be mad. They just like to gossip. I smiled. I wasn't angry. After all, they were telling the truth. After Wade was born, my adoptive parents barely cared about me. I even had to help the maids with chores. But I never thought about abandoning Wade. He was a warm, funny child who always followed me around, treating me like his real sister. The day before our family went bankrupt, he gave Truman and me some valuable jewelry and watches, telling us to flee abroad. I wonder if he knows now that Truman is the mastermind. I haven't been able to reach him. At lunch, the food made me nauseous. Even though I tried to control it, I couldn't stop myself from gagging. Everyone stared at me. Sorry, I must have eaten something bad these past few days, I explained calmly. Joanna smirked. For a moment, I thought you were pregnant. I noticed the suspicion and tension in Truman's eyes as well. I laughed. If I were pregnant, that would be a miracle. I just went to the hospital yesterday, it's only gastritis. They knew how much I wanted a baby, so they didn't question me further. After lunch, I went to throw away the takeout boxes. When I returned, I saw Joanna trip over a box, and Truman instinctively caught her in his arms. Joanna gave him a sweet smile as he asked if she was okay and reminded her to be careful. When they saw me, Truman quickly let go of her. Joanna, unfazed, turned to me and said, Emily, I'm still as clumsy as I was in high school, aren't I? I replied, yes, you haven't changed at all. I went to my room, feeling exhausted, and soon drifted off to sleep. In my half-awake state, I found myself back on the day I ran into Truman 5 years after high school. I was on a blind date at a restaurant when the guy's real girlfriend showed up, threw a glass of water in my face, and accused me of being the other woman. Everyone in the restaurant stared at me in disgust. I was wearing a white dress that day, and when it got soaked, you could clearly see my underwear underneath. Flustered, I tried to cover myself and leave, but the girl grabbed me, demanding an explanation for why I was with her boyfriend. In the midst of the struggle, a suit was draped over me, and that's how Truman appeared, shielding me from all the embarrassment. He put his arm around my shoulders and said to the girl, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm her boyfriend. Even if she's going to break up with me and find someone else, her standards wouldn't drop to someone like your man. With that, the whole scene was diffused easily. After all, he's undeniably good-looking, with a flawless build and aura. No one would believe I'd cheat on him with someone less impressive. When he dropped me off at my door, he sighed and said, Emily, why do you still let people push you around like this? I remember the moon that night was bright as water, reflecting in his eyes like stars. We started talking more frequently after that. Even though we'd kept in touch over the past 5 years, it was mostly just holiday greetings. A month later, he joined my adoptive parents' company, and around the same time, I heard that Joanna had married a rich heir, just 3 days before Truman and I crossed paths again. 6 months later, Truman proposed to me, and I said yes. The bittersweet dreams I'd kept hidden finally turned into a beautiful reality. My adoptive parents even looked into his background, but they didn't uncover that he was the son of their former competitor. Lately, I've been wondering if our reunion that day was just a coincidence, or if he, now without any weaknesses, had finally started his plan for revenge. Maybe even becoming my desk mate in high school and keeping in touch with me for 5 years were all steps he took to get closer to my adoptive parents. Back then, perhaps he just wanted to be friends, but then Joanna left him. When I woke up, it was already evening. The sunset bathed the world in a warm, golden glow, creating a sense of timelessness. The 2 girls who had helped earlier were gone, leaving only Joanna and Truman quietly talking in the living room. "She's been throwing up and feeling sleepy. Could she really be pregnant?" Joanna asked. "She shouldn't be. She's been taking her pills," Truman replied. "But the pills aren't foolproof. If she's pregnant, what will you do?" Truman hesitated for a moment, then said, "I don't want kids." Even though I knew he'd say that, hearing it still sent a dull ache through my chest, spreading to every part of me before finally settling back in my heart and slowly fading away. But this child wasn't meant to be a bargaining chip against Truman anyway. I looked at Joanna. She was my real target. I would make sure she became the final stepping stone for Wade to escape unscathed. Not long after Joanna left, I saw her post on social media, a picture taken from my balcony, with the caption, "After a long day, I finally finished setting up the house." She had stood exactly where I stood earlier today, clearly determined to take my place. I gave her post a like and commented, "Thanks for your hard work today. Let me treat you to dinner sometime." That evening, Truman came back with groceries to make soup. The rich aroma of coconut chicken broth filled the air. I had to give him credit. This was a man who should be sitting in a luxurious villa, being waited on by a team of people, but instead, here he was in a cramped kitchen, pretending to be the perfect husband just to get a bit of information. He brought me a bowl and asked me to taste it, but I still didn't have much of an appetite. He said, "I'll take the day off tomorrow and go to the hospital with you. It's been 2 days, and you're still not feeling better." There was no way I could go to the hospital with him, so I played coy and said, "Feed me, and I'll eat." He smiled softly and spooned some soup to my lips. His gentle eyes seemed to indulge all my whims and tantrums. I managed to drink 2 bowls and ate some chicken, but as soon as he went to take out the trash, I rushed to the bathroom and threw it all up. By the time he came back, I was already sitting calmly on the sofa, watching TV as if nothing had happened. That night, he held me from behind, his hand resting on my waist, idly caressing me. "Have you been able to contact Wade?" he asked. "No, have you?" I replied. "No, either. I just hope he's left the country by now and never comes back. It would be better for him that way." I froze for a moment, feeling as if Truman was ready to let Wade go. But how could that be? After scheming for so many years, how could he possibly show mercy to the son of his enemy? This was just another act, a calculated retreat to fool me. He gradually stopped talking, his breathing deepened, and then he turned me to face him. I resisted, saying, "No. I'm not feeling well." It was the first time I had ever refused him, and I could see the flicker of surprise in his eyes. He hadn't expected this since I had always given in to him over the past 3 years. Not wanting to arouse suspicion, I kissed him lightly on the lips and whispered, "Let's wait until I'm feeling better in a few days." He went to sleep in the guest room, while I lay awake until dawn. The next morning, after Truman left for work, I tried contacting Wade again, but still no response. I sold the watch and jewelry Wade had given me and, along with my savings, I now had nearly $3 million in cash. This was all to secure his future. As for me, if I survived all of this, I planned to move to a quiet town in the south. I've never liked the winters here. Even with the heating on, I always felt cold when the bitter wind blew. A week later, I went to the hospital for a follow-up. The doctor looked at the report and said, "Things aren't looking great. You should rest in bed, and it'd be best to stay in the hospital for observation." Of course, I couldn't stay in the hospital, so I just took some medication to help protect the pregnancy and continued messaging Wade, telling him I was sick and hoping he'd come to see me. After the company went bankrupt, the debts should have been taken on by the corporation. Wade, as a shareholder, didn't have to hide. But in his effort to save the company, he fell into a financial trap, and the massive debt he owed would be impossible to repay in this lifetime. Those people would never let him go. I suspected this was also Truman's doing. As I left the hospital, I received a voice message from Giselle, an old high school friend. She had just given birth and was inviting us to celebrate her baby's 1-month milestone. "You have to come. I've got a secret recipe for getting pregnant," Giselle said excitedly. That's when I realized everyone knew how desperately I wanted a child. I really didn't want to attend an event where people could mock me, and Truman didn't bring it up either when he came home that night. Lately, he'd been coming home late every day, smelling of alcohol and perfume. I recognized the scent. It was Joanna's favorite. Truman lay down next to me after his shower. "How was your day at the hospital?" "It was all right, but I think I still need some medication to regulate my body," I replied. He assumed I was still taking medicine to try to get pregnant. "Medicine can be harmful, you shouldn't take it. Maybe we'll conceive naturally." Yeah, that time when he forgot to use protection, I got pregnant immediately. I snuggled obediently into his arms. "All right, I'll finish this round of treatment, and if it doesn't work, I'll stop." He didn't do anything else. His breathing soon became steady, and I let out a sigh of relief. I thought he might have something intimate going on with Joanna, but so far, it seems like he hasn't taken that step. Maybe continuing to conquer me, the adopted daughter of his enemy, gives him a longer sense of victory. But I don't know how much longer I can hold him off. He's young, full of energy, and he's just crushed his foster parents' company beneath his feet. He's riding high right now. All I can do is keep praying that Wade contacts me soon. Only if he's safe will I be able to let go of my worries. I still went to the full-month banquet because Joanna came to pick me up personally. "You really should get out more. It's not good to stay at home all the time. Come with me." Joanna's makeup was flawlessly done, and she was naturally gorgeous and radiant. She was sure to be the center of attention at the event. "All right, give me a minute. I'll change," I agreed. Since she likes the spotlight, I'll help her shine even brighter. I put on a loose dress and did light makeup. As I was fixing my hair, I noticed a few strands of white. They were white from root to tip, but I'm only 26. I pulled out the white hairs and threw them in the trash. Then I clipped a pearl hairpin on the side of my head. The woman in the mirror looked gentle and serene, like the perfect wife and mother. Many former classmates were at the full-month banquet. Truman had already arrived and was surrounded by people, basking in their admiration. Although he hasn't officially revealed his identity yet, everyone here is sharp enough to know he's someone powerful. When they saw me arrive with Joanna, Truman's expression didn't change, but the others looked like they were ready for drama. A love triangle is always the most interesting topic, no matter where you are. I sat down next to Truman while Joanna mingled with the crowd, chatting and laughing as she always did. She's very popular, and she gets along well with everyone. But soon, people started coming over to talk to me. After all, my family just went bankrupt, and my brother owes billions. We've been on the front pages a lot lately. They were probably speculating about what would happen to us. Would we disappear from public view forever, or would our bodies be found in some desolate place one day? Joanna stood on the outskirts of the group, watching me with a faint smile. I knew she was angry, so I decided to fuel the fire. The more upset she gets now, the easier things will be later. I leaned affectionately against Truman, asking him to get me water when I was thirsty, and to bring me snacks when I was hungry. Truman probably sensed what I was doing, but he still went along with it. However, Joanna was more composed than I expected. She managed to burn her hand with hot water, and instantly, all the attention was on her. Truman rushed over to check on her, carefully wiping her hand where it was burned. Joanna's eyes reddened. "It's nothing, it just hurts a little." Our classmates' eyes darted between us, and Joanna looked at me with a victorious expression through the crowd. I smiled faintly, but my nails dug into my palms. I realized that I wasn't as strong or indifferent as I thought. I've loved this man for 10 years. Now, my heart is being ripped apart, and the pain is so deep that even my lower abdomen aches, as if the unformed child inside me could feel my suffering. But I can't let this pain out. I still have family, my brother's fate is still uncertain. I went to the bathroom to take my medicine. By the time Truman came back, I had already composed myself and continued with the banquet. Before dinner, Giselle called Truman and me aside and gave each of us a lucky charm. Keep this with you. We tried for 7 years to have a baby and were about to go for IVF, but after getting this, now the baby is almost here, Giselle said with confidence. Really? That magical? Truman said skeptically, but he still put the charm in his pocket to not embarrass her. Giselle was satisfied. If you believe in it, I hope next year we'll be attending your baby's full-month party. Next year? I looked out the window at the sea of lights. Would there still be one for me? During dinner, people kept coming over to toast. When they got to me, Truman stopped them. She's not feeling well, she'll just drink tea instead. One of the classmates understood. Oh, you're trying to get pregnant, right? Then neither of you should drink. It's bad for the baby if the father drinks, too. Truman nodded and poured himself some tea as well. I saw Joanna's smile slowly fade. So, are you hoping for a boy or a girl? Someone asked Truman. He smiled. Why not both? We want a boy and a girl. Just as he finished speaking, someone accidentally knocked his cup to the floor. The crash was sharp, the cup shattered into pieces. The room fell silent. Even the children who had been playing stopped. Truman stared blankly at the shards on the ground. Maybe this was fate's answer to us. On the way home, Truman didn't say a word. His foot was heavy on the gas. I leaned against the window, staring into the deep night sky. The city's light pollution was so bad I hadn't seen stars in ages. I wanted to see them again, just once, like when I used to lie in the garden as a child. At a red light, the car stopped. On the side of the road, a disabled couple was selling watermelons with their child. The couple was sweating as they picked melons for a customer. Their 5 or 6-year-old daughter was fanning them with all her might. After the customer left, the husband cut a watermelon and shared it with his wife and daughter. The three of them ate and laughed together, the little girl bouncing happily, her braids flying in the air. When the car started again, I realized my face was already wet with tears. Once we got home, I went to take a shower. I had just started blow-drying my hair when Truman came in and took over for me. I looked at us in the mirror, and for a moment, it felt like everything had gone back to the way it was. Back when we first started dating, Truman didn't want me to tell my family. He said he hadn't made a name for himself at the company yet and was afraid my family would think he was trying to climb the social ladder. He said he wanted to establish himself first, and then he would proudly meet my family. He worked so hard back then, putting in long hours on projects. I would stay in his tiny apartment, cooking and washing for him, and offering advice when he ran into problems. So my family wouldn't find out, I'd go home every night, no matter how late it was. Before I left, I'd always shower at his place, and he would blow-dry my hair just like this, then drive me home. Whenever I walked into the garden, I'd turn around and see him still standing outside the gate, not wanting to leave. I couldn't resist running back to him, kissing him through the fence and roses, not caring that the thorns pricked my skin. That was the happiest, most passionate time of my life. It was like fireworks, bright enough to light up all the darkness in my world. Truman was talking in the mirror, but the sound of the blow-dryer drowned him out, and I didn't catch it. Just as I was about to ask what he said, I saw him staring at my hair, silent. I realized he must have seen the white hairs, too. Since that day, Truman has been coming home after work to cook for me, going on walks with me, and watching shows together. We were like any ordinary loving couple. The neighbors would always compliment me on my good fortune, saying I had a caring and handsome husband. Half a month after I came back, a news alert popped up on my phone: a man's body had been fished out of the river. I stumbled my way to the funeral home, but fortunately, the body wasn't weighed. However, I saw Truman there. He had arrived before me, with a few senior employees from his adoptive parents' company standing respectfully behind him. I knew they had ramped up efforts to find Wade, even raising the private reward to $5 million. They probably believed that this corpse was Wade and were eager to wrap everything up as quickly as possible. I stood where they couldn't see me, waiting until they left before stepping out. But just as I was about to leave, I finally heard that voice I'd been yearning for. Sister. I turned around and saw Wade, who had been missing for almost 3 months, standing in the shadows. The once vibrant and clean-cut young man now looked haggard and gaunt, full of wariness and hostility. I held him tightly, using every ounce of strength I had. We talked right there in the funeral home. He said this was the safest place for now. He told me he had seen the messages I'd sent but didn't dare reply, afraid of dragging me into this mess. He also realized Truman was the mastermind. He had come to the villa and the apartment complex looking for me but noticed people watching the area. He had been biding his time, and when he saw the news today, he was sure I'd come to identify the body. Sister, you really came, he said, tears welling up in his eyes. There were 1,000 things I wanted to say, but this wasn't the time for reminiscing. I handed him an address and a password. This is a short-term rental I booked in the neighborhood. It's already verified under my name, so you only need the password to enter. I've left food and clothes there for you. Wait for me there, and we'll go abroad together. Wade shook his head. I can't fly right now, and I think I've already been banned from leaving the country. Sis, I'm going to kill Truman. Once I've killed him, you can take his inheritance and live a good life. There was no way I could let him do that. If he killed someone, his life would be ruined, and all I wanted was for him to live. Living, that was enough. I managed to calm Wade down for the moment, but I didn't tell him I was already pregnant with Truman's child. I was afraid that if I told him, he wouldn't trust me anymore. Once I made sure Wade was safe, I began executing my plan. First, I contacted a lawyer to confirm that Wade hadn't been officially banned from leaving the country yet. Then I arranged to meet Joanna at a coffee shop below Truman's office. She arrived an hour late, strolling in gracefully. Emily, sorry for keeping you waiting. A client showed up, and Truman insisted I join the meeting. That's why I'm late. I wasn't bothered. It's fine. Have a seat. She ordered an espresso and noticed that I was drinking plain water. Why aren't you having coffee? Not sure what to order. I can recommend something. The latte here is great. I'm pregnant, so I can't have coffee. I placed the medical report in front of her and gently touched my slightly rounded belly. The baby's already 3 months along, so you and Truman are impossible. I didn't have much time, I had to make her feel nervous right away. Sure enough, she froze for a moment before letting out a laugh. So, you already know. But don't think you can use this baby to tie Truman down. Why don't you ask him if he even wants the child you're carrying? I leaned in slowly, speaking each word clearly. He might not like me, but he definitely cares about the baby. That day when you asked at my house what he would do if I was pregnant, didn't he hesitate? Her expression wavered. I continued, at Giselle's baby's 1-month party, you saw how much he cares about children, didn't you? You probably don't know, but that night after we got home, he exhausted me. Lately, he's been coming home right after work just to spend more time with me. He's eager to have both a son and a daughter. This lie hit hard. Joanna's beautiful eyes grew cold as she stared at me, but she was smart enough to spot a flaw. If that's true, then why haven't you told him you're pregnant yet? I smiled faintly. Because I already know it was him who destroyed my company. I'll never give birth to the child of my enemy. And I need you to help me with 2 things. Afterward, I'll give up the baby. You think your child can threaten me? She scoffed. I'm not threatening you. I'm helping you clear the way. Joanna gave me a suspicious look, trying to gauge whether I was serious. After a long pause, she asked, what do you want me to do? I replied, first, no matter what, keep Truman occupied for 2 days so he doesn't come home. Second, in front of Truman, dig up the rose garden at the villa. I planted it, and I don't want to leave it to you too. For Wade and me to leave successfully, we had to escape Truman's grasp. In this city, no one could help us except Joanna, who could keep Truman unaware of our plans. What are you going to do? Leave. And if I refuse? I leaned back lazily in my chair. Then I'll go upstairs right now and tell Truman I'm pregnant. We'll see how much he cares about this baby. In the end, Joanna agreed. As she left, she said, Emily, you're really scary. Scary? Compared to everything Truman and she had done to me over the past 10 years, what I was doing was nothing. So, I left the rose garden for them as a gift. I wanted them to never have peace together. When Truman returned, I was watching news about the border. Although Wade could still leave the country, he had been restricted from taking high-speed trains or flights. If we wanted to get to Australia, where Wade had studied, we'd have to travel to the border first and then pass through Southeast Asia. It was complicated, but it was the only way. Once Wade was officially banned from leaving, we wouldn't have another chance. Why are you watching the news? Don't you usually prefer dramas? Truman sat down beside me. I changed the channel with the remote. Just watching whatever. He pulled me into his arms, stroking me like a cat. It was a gesture of dominance, a habit he'd developed since the day my family went bankrupt. My gut told me he was close to finding Wade. Joanna hadn't made any moves yet. I was starting to wonder if she had backed out and told Truman about my plan. His hand moved to my belly, and my heart skipped a beat. Had he found out? What would he do to me? I didn't care what he did to me, just don't hurt Wade. Time seemed to stop. I could hear my heart pounding. Just when I was about to break under the pressure, he rested his chin on my forehead and whispered, Next month, let's go back to S-City. I want you to meet my parents. His kisses rained down on me, soft as petals. I was stunned. His parents had died in a joint suicide after going bankrupt when he was 17. When we got married, he had no family on his side, and he'd never returned to High City, not even mentioning it since. And now he was saying he wanted to take me back to meet his parents. Could it be that he wanted to come clean to me? Could it be that he had finally fallen for me? Just then, the phone rang abruptly. Truman didn't answer it, but the caller was persistent. He glanced at the screen. It was Joanna. Truman, my ex-husband is here. Please come help me, she whispered, her voice shaky and nervous. I'll be right there. Don't open the door, Truman replied before leaving. A second ago, he'd been telling me he wanted to take me home, and the next, he disappeared from my sight. Even though I knew Joanna was distracting him, just as I had planned, why did it still hurt so much? He had just said he wanted to take me home. I thought maybe I'd finally become someone special to him. I had even forgotten another possibility, maybe he wanted to take me to his parents' graves to tell them their revenge had been fulfilled, and make the daughter of their enemy kneel and beg for forgiveness. The TV show was making the audience laugh hysterically, and I laughed along until tears silently streamed down my face. As night fell, I stood outside the villa. In just 1 month, the white fence had started peeling, and the delicate roses were wilting. The little mound of dirt was now so flat it was barely noticeable. Tonight, the rose bids farewell to her little prince forever. Casually bought an outfit at the mall and went to the restroom to change. After putting on a hat, I blended in with a lively group of middle-aged women and left. After confirming I had lost the person tailing me, I had the car rental company deliver the vehicle to an area near Wade's apartment complex. Once Wade got in, I immediately followed the GPS route. The destination was City A, where I had made arrangements a while ago. Someone there would help us cross the border and take us to the international airport in the neighboring country. As we left the city, Wade kept glancing back. I didn't get the chance to visit my parents' graves. I pressed down on the gas. They're watching over you from above. They'll protect you. On the road, Wade and I took turns driving, and after 27 hours, we finally arrived. Crossing the border was smooth too. We were taken onto a bus filled with people just like us. Exhausted, I leaned back in the seat. Despite the tension and all the rushing, the miscarriage I had feared didn't happen. This little life inside me was stronger than I thought. Wade handed me his phone. It was his friend from Australia, sending photos of some houses, modern apartments and rural farms. He asked me to pick. I chose one near the coast. Facing the sea, where spring flowers bloom. I think that's a great choice. I can get a job as a lifeguard there. Sis, I'll take care of you from now on, Wade said, planning for the future. I smiled. Alright, but you better work hard. I had a tourist visa, so I'd have to return home when it expired. But I already had a plan for settling down. The bus moved through the morning mist of summer. A faint light appeared in the east, and outside the window, there were vast banana groves. Occasionally, I saw small white temples with pointed roofs, offering flowers and fruits in peaceful serenity. In this calmness, I thought about the past 3 years, like I'd been living in a dream, with Truman as the dream weaver, and me foolishly trapped inside. Luckily, the dream was over, and I still had a bright future ahead. Suddenly, something approached. Instinctively, I looked outside the window. The next second, I felt myself being thrown into the air, slamming into the roof of the bus before crashing down hard. My abdomen struck the seat violently, and a sharp pain tore through me as a warm liquid slowly trickled down. I had no idea what was happening. In my daze, I saw Wade, covered in blood, crawling towards me. Fear filled his eyes as he desperately reached out, trying to touch me. I wanted to hold his hand too, like when we were kids, and tell him not to be afraid. But where were my hands? Why couldn't I see them? The light faded from my sight, and I thought I was dying. In the last bit of light, I saw a little angel walking toward me, stepping on roses. She came to my side, her soft body hugging me without saying a word, just smiling sweetly. I realized who she was, and my heart, which I thought had become invincible, felt like it was being pierced by 1,000 arrows. I had brought her into this world, yet I had considered abandoning her. But she still loved me. I'm sorry. I sobbed uncontrollably. The little angel kept smiling, her tiny hand wiping away my tears. Such a good child, and I had thought of not having her. Luckily, she was still with me. I would never part from her again. I stopped crying, gently holding her in my arms, kissing her little face. Together, we walked toward the place where the roses bloomed. When Truman came out of the police station, it was already the next morning. Joanna's abusive ex-husband had shown up, and they had gotten into a fight, leading to both of them being detained. The police said they had contacted Emily to come and sign for his release, but she hadn't shown up. He knew she must be angry. When he returned home, Emily wasn't there. She didn't answer his calls, but her clothes, shoes, and bags were still at home, so he assumed she had just gone out for a bit. But by 10 p.m., she still hadn't come back. She had never disappeared for so long before, nor had she ever stayed angry with him for so long. He contacted Giselle and the others, but no one had heard from her. He started to feel restless. During a company meeting, his mind kept wandering, something that had never happened before. On the third day, the private investigator called, telling him that while they hadn't found any trace of Wade, the loan sharks had suddenly all headed south that morning. South? A sense of unease washed over him. Yes, I just got word, they're almost in City A now. City A, a beautiful border town, the gateway to Southeast Asia by land. He suddenly remembered when he came home the other day, Emily had been watching the news from that region. No, it couldn't be. She was so fragile and timid. There's no way she'd go somewhere so foreign and dangerous. He finally decided to go to the police, but on his way through the dining room, he noticed a document pinned under a vase. It was a divorce agreement. She had already signed it. He stood there in shock, unable to believe she would do this. For years, he had been used to always seeing her when he turned around. But now, she had left him. His phone buzzed, snapping him back to reality. But it wasn't a message from Emily, it was a news alert: armed conflict in a neighboring country, bus hit by shell, 7 dead, 15 injured. Identities of the deceased being confirmed, suspected to include citizens from our country. It was foreign news, but his heart ached inexplicably. With trembling hands, he dialed Emily's number over and over, sending her messages, telling her that he would take care of all the debts, Wade wouldn't have to hide anymore, and they could live together peacefully from now on. But every message went unanswered. Until a strange number called. Is this Mr. Truman? Yes, it is. Hello, this is the embassy. Truman finally saw Emily. She lay there quietly, as if she were just sleeping. The staff told him the bomb was so powerful that parts of her body were still missing. They also told him she had been 3 months pregnant. He looked at her silently, without tears or any change in expression. It was as if the person lying there wasn't his wife, but a stranger. Joanna made a call to her associate. Is she really dead? Yes, she died on the spot. Her body was burned beyond recognition. Joanna was silent for a moment. What about Wade? Is he dead too? Not sure, haven't seen his body. Maybe he's in the hospital. What about Truman, how is he doing? He seems stable. After all, it was Emily who betrayed him, running off with Wade without saying a word. Her death probably settled everything. Joanna felt something was off, but couldn't pinpoint what it was. Suddenly feeling uneasy, she deleted all her chat history with Emily, thinking this would keep her safe. Truman brought Emily's ashes back and buried them in the cemetery. He remodeled Emily's villa, erasing all traces of their family, and moved his sister from the small town to live with him. He no longer hid his true identity, and people gradually learned about his past. But no one judged him. In fact, they admired him, praised him, saying he was destined for greatness. Some even wanted to marry their daughters to him. Victory is for the strong, while the weak are quickly forgotten. Only his sister, waking in the middle of the night, would sometimes see him sitting alone in the garden, soaking his shoulders, withered roses by his side. One night, she couldn't help but ask, "Brother, is something on your mind? Talk to me." Truman smiled. "I'm fine." His sister pointed to the burn marks on his fingers from his cigarette. "You say you're fine, but you didn't even feel the pain." Truman looked down at his fingers, where a blister had already formed. "Brother, did you fall for her?" she asked softly. His hand trembled slightly. No. He hadn't fallen for her. She was just a pawn in his revenge, a convenient lover who followed his every wish. His sister sighed softly. She knew her brother, his lips always tightened when he lied. Joanna observed cautiously for a long time and found that Truman didn't seem to suspect anything about what she had done. She often visited his sister, trying to build a good relationship with her. After all, Truman was very popular now, and for some reason, she no longer felt as confident around him as she once had. His sister treated her well, often going shopping and dining with her. Sometimes, Truman would join them, and everything seemed to be back to normal. The only thing in the garden that always caught her attention was the roses. Every time she saw them, she would remember what Emily had said, in front of Truman, "Dig up the roses in my villa's garden. I planted them, and I don't want to leave them to you." That sentence, those flowers, felt like thorns stabbing deep into her heart. In the end, she couldn't hold it in any longer and suggested to Truman's sister that they renovate the garden, to give the house a fresh look. His sister, not knowing the reason behind it, agreed. She thought a change might lift the mood as well. Since her brother had left everything in her hands, she hired a designer to redesign the space, and the construction crew soon arrived. By the time Truman returned, all the roses had been uprooted, and the workers were busy turning the soil. It was as if someone had struck a nerve. He angrily shoved a worker to the ground. It was then that he saw the crystal bottle, containing the ultrasound photo. The bottle had been bought during his honeymoon with Emily. The lid was shaped like a little angel, which Emily loved, and she had kept it on her bedside table. When they moved, it had gone missing, and Truman had searched for it but couldn't find it. He thought it was lost for good. He picked up the bottle and took out the photo inside. Seeing that tiny form on the image, it felt like his whole world collapsed. He had always believed that Emily didn't know she was pregnant. After all, she had once wanted a child so badly, she would never have left him suddenly if she had known. But she knew. She knew everything. Beneath the photo was a short line in her handwriting, "An angel once came by." She had left him in the most final, decisive way possible, with no chance for him to regret anything. But he did regret it. Joanna noticed that Truman hadn't moved from where he had fallen. Puzzled, she walked over to him. When she saw what he was holding, she immediately turned and ran away. She had been careless. She thought that no matter what Emily had done, it wouldn't have such a huge impact. But Emily had pushed him straight into the abyss. She was truly afraid now. Truman's sister, realizing she had made a terrible mistake, hurriedly began trying to replant the rose bushes. "Brother, I'll plant the flowers again. They'll bloom, they definitely will." But the roses had been cut down at the roots. Just like a broken mirror, it couldn't be pieced back together, and spilled water couldn't be gathered again. Truman slowly stood up and walked into the night, alone. His sister watched his silhouette disappear, and she broke down crying. Truman didn't return for a long time after that. When he did, his temples were streaked with gray. She looked at him, heartbroken. Her brother was only 27 years old. He wasn't alone when he came back. There was a couple with him, both disabled, who were selling watermelons. Her brother bought all of their watermelons. He gave the couple a large sum of money, and they left, overwhelmed with gratitude. She didn't understand why her brother suddenly bought so many watermelons. Even if they all ate them together, there would be no way to finish them all that summer. "Go study abroad. I've arranged everything for you," Truman said to her kindly, as if he no longer blamed her. "You're sending me away?" She looked at him in disbelief. "No, I want you to see the world. Didn't you always want to travel abroad?" He ruffled her hair the way he had when they were younger. And so, she left for another country. Maybe some time apart would be good for both of them. A month later, the butler called. The villa had caught fire in the middle of the night, and everyone escaped, except for Truman. By the time they found him, her brother had already passed away. Next to him lay one of Emily's floral dresses, and at the dress's belly, there was the crystal bottle with the ultrasound photo. They said it was an accident, but she knew. Her brother no longer wanted to live. Her brother, who at 17 had buried their parents with his own hands, and at 27 had buried his wife and child. The boy who had once dreamed of becoming a scientist had taken up the sword to slay the dragon, only to become the dragon himself. Standing alone at the peak, he knew he would never see the sunrise. So, he sought the comfort of the night sky, chasing after the stars. Epilogue. Australia, by the sea. Wade sat in his wheelchair, surrounded by 4 or 5 professionals. "Mr. Wade, I am Truman's lawyer. This is his will, please take a look." "His will?" Wade's expression shifted slightly. "Yes. A month ago, there was a fire at Truman's villa. The fire was too intense, and Mr. Truman couldn't make it out. In his will, he left all his properties, stocks, and funds to you. He also took care of any debts. You can return home now." Wade didn't say a word. He looked out over the sea, but there were no signs of spring by the shore. He returned to his home country and visited Emily's grave, bringing her a bouquet of roses. In the photo on her tombstone, she smiled gently. He reached out to softly touch her face, and as the mountain breeze swept over his fingers, it felt as if she was responding to him. In that bombing attack, she had died instantly. He was severely injured and rushed to the hospital. When he woke up, one of his legs was gone. He wished he had died back then too, alongside his sister. He glanced at the gravestone next to hers. It was Truman's. There was no photo, just his name. Between their 2 gravestones was a small white headstone, carved with a cute little angel. That was his nephew. Once, Wade had been carefree. He had loving parents and a sister who loved him, and he had loved them too. But now, everyone he loved, and who loved him, was gone. And the one he hated was dead too. A beast stirred inside him, one that would destroy him if it wasn't released. "Are you Wade?" A timid voice came from behind him. He turned and saw a girl in her 20s. He recognized her from photos. She was Truman's sister. His sister. He nodded. She looked at his empty pant leg, her eyes full of sadness. The grudges and hatred from the previous generation had all fallen on them, the innocent children. As he looked at her, the beast inside Wade began to quiet. The beast lowered its body, ready to pounce. "Do you have a home now?" he asked her gently. She shook her head. With her brother gone, she had no one left. He extended his claws, "Then come with me." She hesitated, having braced herself for his anger, but instead, he calmly accepted her. She took his hand, thinking that perhaps everything was finally over. As she pushed him out of the cemetery, a luxury car carried them away, back into the noise of the city. The end.